All right, welcome back to the Atlanta Construction Podcast. Our guest today is Luminous Labs, and with co-founders Nick LeBlanc and Greg Miles with us today. Luminous Labs provides architectural renderings, pre-construction virtual tours, and 3D animation, and all kinds of things like that. Thanks for being here, guys.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us on. We're looking forward to it.
Yeah, really excited to talk about all the neat things that you guys provide, and some of the technology and yeah, all kinds of topics to touch on. But maybe just to start, which is typical for our podcast, maybe just start a little bit about your personal story, and then maybe the origins of how you started Luminous Labs. So maybe we can start with you, Nick. You're a Dal graduate.
Yeah, so my dad's an architect, so that's kind of how I got into the space of 3D. He was kind of always had me fiddling around on computers and stuff since I was pretty young. But in the last 2 or 3 years, it's really picked up in terms of the hardware that's available and the software itself. So Greg and I have actually known each other since Pee Wee hockey, or it's been
I think it was Pee Wee.
Yeah, so we've known each other for our whole lives. We grew up over in Cole Harbour, so it kind of picked up when Greg was getting into the same skill set.
Mm-hmm.
He reached out to me and asked, a few questions about the software, asked what I was doing, and we just kind of snowballed from there.
So it kind of started as a hobby,
it
somewhat,
did. Yeah. No, I was a big gamer growing up too, so all the 3D stuff always just blew me away, and it was really a passion that I was lucky enough to connect with Greg on and get going.
Yeah. What about you, Greg?
Yeah, so I actually was originally an accountant. So I got my degree at St. Mary's, and I had my first real accounting job out in Calgary. So I moved out there to start the CPA program, and I got about 2 weeks into it when I was like, this is just not what I'm doing. It was very weird, I guess, compared to school, because it's like in school, at least there's some, even though they kind of make things unorganized for you to work through, it makes sense. Whereas I found that when you were actually working at a small accounting firm, nothing makes sense. It's just like what you're getting from the clients makes no sense. Like all the past years were just sort of like pushed into kind of get it done. So I just realized very quickly that it wasn't something that I wanted to do. And it was actually around that exact time that I started using SketchUp. The reason why I had originally looked into SketchUp is because I was working for a local construction company. And I just noticed in a lot of the meetings that, it seems like so much thought was being put into making these proposals and doing these buildings, but people weren't really spending a lot of time actually, to really visualize the project. What you would get is kind of like a generic gas station. Maybe someone like goes in like Paint or Photoshop, puts the logo on it. I've seen too, they kind of do like street signs. So they'll just kind of say like, to say like this is on this street, they just Photoshop a street sign in. And I just felt like there was a market for that, even if it was just me working for a construction company, even on the side, and just creating these renders. I thought it'd be interesting. So that's originally how Nick mentioned. I reached out to him because I know that he had done this in the past. And so we actually both first started to try rendering with Unreal Engine, going from SketchUp to Unreal Engine. And that is just, it was just not going to happen at the time. Like it was so difficult. And ultimately we just didn't understand what we had to do to get to that point. So, when COVID first started, we originally were just we thought it would just sort of be like a part-time job. But at the beginning of COVID, that kind of gave us time to set all that stuff up. And we just sort of quickly realized that there was a huge demand in it, not only for just having sort of what you'd call a billboard render, what just on the front of every construction site, but we realized that there was a pretty big appetite for these virtual tours. And we kind of think that what we do a bit differently compared to other rendering firms is that we like to do a lot of renders. So sometimes if a certain company would be doing a building, they might only give 3 or 4 interior renders, where it's not uncommon for us to do over 100 panoramas across all the units, and then another 50 or 60 photos just throughout the building to really show the entire area, not only for potential tenants, but also for internal use to help, give out to get accurate quotes, or just to convey to the construction team exactly what's going to be built. Mm-hmm. And that's sort of how we got started with everything. It just sort of started as what was going to be a hobby, and then I ended up not continuing with the CPA program just to do this full time, because we really have been enjoying it.
We were lucky enough too. I think at the beginning of COVID, we had a lot of free time on our hands, so it was, we really dove into everything, just immersed ourselves into the whole software community and tried to gain as much ground as we could. And I really do think that maybe gave us an edge in terms of like we were probably able to cram about 3 or 4 years of learning if we were, working full time into a year. So it was super helpful actually.
So you started Luminous Labs during transition at the beginning of 2019. Is that correct, or before? Sort of.
Technically, it was actually I joined in after Nick. Nick started Luminous Labs probably like a year before we'd even talked about this. Yeah, right, Nick? It was a completely different.
Yeah, it was originally for projection mapping. So you could 3D. You could scan an object with a projector and then projection map. It's similar to stuff that's down on the waterfront, and that just kind of got put on hold, and that's kind of where the name came from. And then we started doing the render stuff as well, and we were like, well, that works.
Our legal name is Luminous Labs Projector Signage.
Yeah,
I think it's kind of funny, but so, he said the name. I was like, I really like that. I was like, let's just use that.
Yeah,
it's already set up. So
kind of a weird transition, but I do think COVID played a good impact into that.
So let's break this down for our listeners. Your services that you're providing are they typically to building owners and developers. People are trying to sell real estate prior to construction completion, where you're, whether you're providing a 3D or a rendering from street level in a still shot, or a virtual tour where you get drone footage of window views from certain elevations to make views real time in a building that's not built yet, and you provide a virtual tour of the space, all created with the software. So are you working with, for the last couple of years, maybe give some examples of some developers you've worked with and just sort of the different requests and specific services that you're providing? I know you mentioned to me before the show the Margaretta for Bank Group, some work there, and currently you're working on some stuff for the Kennard Center in Southwest.
Southwest has been gracious enough to bring us on for the Kennard project, and we've gotten a good amount of work out of that alone, and just to be able to see that building go up is amazing. I live in the Alexander, so I actually overlook. I'm on the 12th floor looking over the construction site, so I usually work in the day on the renders, and I can go out
working
and
on
see
the renders while you can
how
see
it's going up. Yeah, so it's kind of like
a office. That's cool.
It's
and as you mentioned too, with the Margaretta, we were working with Smarter Spaces on that one, and that was a really interesting project to be a part of, because that was the first time that we got to kind of see how we could be a part of that development cycle. And originally, I think that we were only going to do maybe a couple of units, because that was what's kind of typical. You'd see that a company would be getting, maybe 1 or 2 of these units done, but Bank actually wanted to move forward with, I believe we did 10 or 11 in total.
So
it was very interesting. Oh, sorry, go.
These are virtual tours of these units, like full walkthroughs of the unit prior to being built, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, and it was actually something that we sort of had to brainstorm a little bit and figure out some things, is that the shape of the building, it has a courtyard, so it's kind of like this. So we actually were doing some of the interior units of the building. So you'd look across, and it wasn't a drone shot, it was the actual building. So we were trying to figure out exactly how to do that, because it wouldn't make any sense if the courtyard was looking, across the city for that particular angle. So we actually had to do some playing around and kind of optimize our workflow so that we could actually get the Revit model in there. And then we basically would cut a hole where the unit is. And so then when you're looking out, there's actually a particular unit that I think is probably the one I like the most. And it's right on it's level with the actual courtyard itself. And you're looking out just like you would look right out at it. And you can see like the rocks and everything, or whatever the roof design was. And that was the one I think that I definitely got more interested in it, because it really shows, I guess, the level visualization that you can go if you're willing to spend more time on it and show the building and the views and get all the materials correct. And a couple friends of mine are actually moving into that building, and both of them used the virtual tour to sort of pick out if they wanted to be at that building or not.
Yeah. So I guess a bit of background on that process is like we can do the still renders for exteriors and stuff like that, and that's usually all you need for a billboard. But the real advantage of the virtual tours is that you can get into your unit pre-construction, so you can theoretically sell those units pre-construction. And not only that, but we can take the drone up at a specific height and take a panoramic 360. So maybe I'll pull up the video here. So we have a little animation that kind of shows the apartment unit just in a traditional kind of video animation form.
And so this has like all of the exact finishes, even down to pieces of furniture that are going to be in the unit.
Yeah,
colors.
everything inside is completely CG, so it's completely customizable. You can swap out the floors. You can test different marble options. You can
So cool.
pretty much do whatever.
Is that in the Margareta or is that in a?
This is the so we're just showing the little test unit animation,
Right.
and then I'll pull up the actual little walkthrough here. Just because I do think it's super helpful, especially for us, to have the drone footage, because we can not only show, just pop this open here.
Getting the drone shots it's really unparalleled with what we can do, because even if we have to put a background outside, like if we don't have a drone shot, you're either going to get sort of like a generic like city photo, or we put like an actual building out there, but we wouldn't be able to recreate, say, like the harbor and then the Dartmouth side. It's just, not only would it take up so much time that the price of the project is going to shoot through the roof, but it's also that the computing power needed for that is incredibly high, whereas a photo is far more realistic than we could ever model, at least for the drone shots, and everything is kind of to scale, and it looks very realistic, and then it uses almost no computer resources.
So that ends up being the exact view from that 12th floor deck on the Kennard Center on the Dartmouth side.
Yeah. So what the drone does is on most DJI drones, you can set it up to go into panorama mode. So it'll take a photo looking up, a photo straight, a photo down, move over, up, straight, down, and it creates essentially a sphere. So what we do in our 3D program is we put that outside the window, blow the sphere up till it's the appropriate scale, and then you just have that 360 image. And it outputs with our 3D images in the same format, so the way it almost wraps at the bottom is the same way that DJI does it. So, if you were to go by the window and look straight down, you can theoretically see, the ground down on the ground floor and everything below the building as well.
And that's a big one too, because typically if you just sort of have a flat image, if you have to get near the window, like whether it's a balcony or a shot like that, then you're just going to look down basically into the abyss, because there's nothing there. So it's either just going to be like white, black, whatever it is. But with this, you can actually, like, the drone will look straight down. So you can actually almost go to the window and look almost over the edge. It's not perfect, but it is far better than just sort of, like I said, like having nothing there at all.
And the deliverable is like, the deliverable for the, for the end user is you're basically walking through the space as you would on Google Maps or Google Earth.
Yeah, exactly.
Very similar. And this gives, this was something that I used when I moved into my current apartment. Granted, the software was a little bit older and dated, so it wasn't, as crisp as you can get it today. But it just gives people the comfort of being able to go see their apartment. They can pull it up on their mobile. They can pull it up on their laptop, sit in bed and kind of tour different units. And we just found that would be, not only helpful for the client, but for also the developer who, traditionally spends a good amount of money on model suites. And if you do have a model suite, you usually have to pay someone to be there to kind of give people tours. This gives people the opportunity to really do their own thing and walk around and see what they want to see. And it also comes with analytics too. So that's another thing developers have liked to see. You can see where people spend the most time, if they're in the 1 bedrooms and the 2 bedrooms, if if they stop at the kitchen the most. It comes with
I guess it is worth mentioning though. That's with the 3D Vista. So that's with the higher end one. So the one that we might use if someone just wants to see like a quick tour.
This one here is just cool.
We have one called Kula. So Kula is great. It's extremely lightweight. It's got free hosting, so we don't have to charge any money for it. Basically, we normally kind of put the baseline tour that's in Kula sort of inside of the package, because it's the easiest way of actually showing our work. So we kind of include that, but we do have one where you can kind of upgrade it a little bit, and that will come with the analytics so that you can actually see where people are clicking, what they're looking at. If there's like a lobby with 4 hotspots, say like a gym, I don't know, like there's like offices, a meeting lounge, and then I don't know, just like elevators to go up to the unit, something like that as an example, then you might look at it and say, okay, 75% of the time people are clicking on, the gym. So that means that if we are actually going to be creating some material, then maybe we should put, 3 photos of the gym in one of the other locations, something like that. So it does just give, I guess, a little bit more analytics behind where you can focus your marketing. And it's something small, but, you never know that might help you get a couple extra tenants.
Yeah, so essentially, like business-wise, this specific service of 3D virtual tours, you're basically providing the developer, the building owner, with a marketing tool to sell the units, and by doing that, you're avoiding the cost of having an agent in there, spending time and money selling it.
Yeah.
So lots of
a lot of the time too, the model suite won't even be, what you're looking at. It'll have the same finishes and everything, but it's not actually your apartment. And I think that's where people kind of connect, is when they're really serious about a place and then they see it and it's virtual and they can walk around and get a sense of, maybe we put the TV here, maybe we move the kitchen over there, or not the kitchen, but maybe we move the TV over this way.
Yeah.
It really gives people a sense of the space, and I think people really like that.
Yeah, something that is like we haven't done a project on this scale because it's kind of overkill, but theoretically what you could do is we could render every single unit. So like you go to like the second floor, do every unit, third floor, and then what we do is we can make it so that there's no background, but then we can put that in. So then you have the same unit on the floors going up, but then the view is changing. That makes sense. So that one's kind of like I don't think anyone would actually need to go that far into detail, but theoretically we could actually have it so that if you are showing a unit, it's the exact unit with the exact view. But again, you don't necessarily need to do that. Like most of the time, if you have like 10 to 15 units, then that's going to cover just about everything, since there are a lot of units that are mirrored.
Right.
And then we could show that, but most of the time it's just kind of redundant.
But you could take each specific unit that has a variation.
Yeah.
And have renderings of each of those units, say a year or two in advance of actual having tenants in there, and use those as a selling tool, and the only selling tool that you probably would need.
Yeah, and I think actually what Southwest had done for the Canard is, I think that they weren't like they had 2 sort of layouts in mind, I guess, for the upper levels and including the penthouse. So I think that with our tours, we actually did one for them, and then they were kind of gauging if people were interested in them. And I believe that there actually wasn't enough interest, that they decided to go with sort of the bigger units because they were able to get enough people that were interested in signing. And that I don't have too much information about that because we had just talked about it in passing. But I think that is just kind of a good example where it's like, if you're kind of stuck between 2 ideas, pretty much any time that we are showing you options, it's going to be quite a bit cheaper than if you just say like, I'm going to go with this one, and you end up not liking it. Just a sort of a little sidebar here that the part of the reason why I was actually interested in getting into this as well is someone I knew out in Calgary, her family bought a house. So it was in Calgary, they often do these large subdivisions where you buy the house and then you get to choose between, 3 or 4 materials for everything, like, bathroom tiles, kitchen counters, that sort of thing. So when they went in to actually pick all the materials, they sort of had like the little samples and they had them all on the counter and they say, oh yeah, this looks great together. But then when you actually see those materials on the entire floor and the entire counter and the cabinets, the colors didn't really work as well as they'd like. So then they ended up basically being stuck with materials that weren't low quality materials, but it just wasn't exactly what they had wanted. And if they had even just one rendering of the kitchen, then they could have looked at that and go, oh, actually, that makes no sense to have, this floor and this marble together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's
kind of neat because I think, one of the unique things about a lot of your services is that, in some sense, you're providing a marketing tool for building owners to rent the space to potential, buyers, but also like you can use it for construction purposes too.
Yeah.
Whereas you could look at a floor plan and say, oh, I like the layout, but that's for construction purposes. And then you guys can actually 3D render that. Similar to SketchUp or something, and actually show what the unit looks like from a 3D rendering still as well.
And it's
Nick,
a lot cheaper, I guess. Sorry, go ahead, Greg.
No, I was just gonna say, if you could actually pull up the Margaretta tour, there's one unit. It's 408, I think, and I think that's a perfect example of some of the benefits that we can provide with these tours, because if you just look at the floor plan, you're kind of like, okay, so there's windows here, here, and here. But in that particular unit, there's actually a building probably about three to 4 feet outside of the window. So normally what you would get with like a 3D tour like that is that people would just put a generic background out there. And you would assume that in that bedroom, you have a clear view of, the city. But in reality, you're actually just looking right into another building. And that's, I guess, just the kind of planning that we can help with, because then if they saw that, they go, okay, well, maybe, we're going to put a window there, but we'll, make it like it's like a frosted glass window, or maybe we just remove the window. We can just kind of play around with the options to find something that works.
And usually, like cost wise, in terms of if you're going to go that route and just kind of build it, if you make one mistake, it could end up costing what a whole tour of a unit would cost, or even multiple units. Like the virtual, or the model suites that are traditionally done, I think occupy, well, you have to build them, and then it's an empty space that's unoccupied, so that's revenue that you could be getting out of a space that just goes unused. So there's a lot of, I think, benefit to seeing these things beforehand, and if you can catch one mistake in pre-construction and it saves you 20 grand, then you pay for yourself.
I mean, even for cabinetry and millwork and door hardware and flooring, I mean, you guys can change, a wood grain look to a solid colored floor, or the kitchen cabinets, the colors there, and all kinds of stuff that would be valuable in the pre-planning construction phase too, right?
Yeah. So we that's kind of why we dug into Unreal Engine, and maybe this is a good segue to kind of get into, I guess, the next piece of software that we're working on.
It was Lumion before, right?
It was Lumion before to start off. The one that we just showed with the interior was actually Blender. It's a software called Blender. And the amazing thing about Blender is it's completely free to use, open source software. So if you wanted to go download it right now, you can go do that for free. Same with Unreal Engine. I think a lot of these softwares are trying to get people in the door with the free software. You get people that learn it and kind of master it. And then I think Blender, I don't even think Blender there's a development fund you can.
Yeah, it works mostly off of donations. And they also have something called the Blender Market, where people can buy like sofas and things. And then it's like, if you sell something for $8, they take like $3 or something like that. So it just makes enough money to kind of keep the developers paid, so that they can get really like a good team developing it.
Right.
But for the most part, it is, it's an open source project. You're not going to get a $3,000 a year license. Like things like Revit, 3ds Max, all of those are, I believe it's like at least $3,000 a year each. Maybe I'm a bit wrong.
Revit is, yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty expensive.
So just for our non-tech listeners like myself, trying to grasp a lot of this software, be it Lumion or what you're using now, Unreal Engine 5 and Blender, Unity, these are all, softwares to build real-time 3D creation tools. Like, is this some of the same software they use to create video games and those kind of things?
Yeah. So Unreal Engine is the engine that Fortnite ran on, if you know the game Fortnite that all the kids used to play a while ago. So it's pretty amazing what it can do.
Adults too.
Adults, There's a lot of adults playing Fortnite too, but LucasWorks Studio actually just started. So when they filmed The Mandalorian, they used Unreal Engine for their background. So they created something called a void. So instead of having a green screen, which traditionally, if I was wearing something reflective on myself, like a piece of armor, it would reflect the green screen. So you'd have to, work around that. And it's quite hard to fix some screen bleed when you get stuff like that. But Unreal Engine, they did a complete 360 LED screen. So we'll throw some videos up.
Because it's pretty incredible though.
But they can, so they used it to kind of get around, I think, COVID shooting, so they could, have a sunset shot that lasts 8 hours, so they can really dial stuff in. So you can really get in it. It looks unbelievable, like photorealistic quality. So
and something that's so just with the Mandalorian as well, something I thought was really interesting is, so like they actually have the director, and then I don't know what the exact title was, but it was basically like the video director. And what he could actually do is, if they they wanted a particular shot, but then the mountain in the background was just at a weird angle. Like maybe it's like they just had to shift it. Then he actually had the VR glasses on. He could just go in almost with his hands and kind of like move stuff around like that to get that perfect shot. Whereas before, with even a green screen, they'd have to go and actually get the person to like re-render out the mountains and do all this stuff. But Unreal Engine does it like it's real time because it's a video game engine. That's effectively, even when we're making these interior units with Unreal Engine, it's a video game more or less.
Right.
But it's just that we're tailoring it towards architecture.
Just to piggyback on that, and just to maybe this will give some context. I know it's a bit of a tangent, but when the Notre Dame Cathedral burnt in 2019, there was like some talk initially of the architects, obviously, because they want to rebuild this extremely complex structure back to exactly the way it was before, and there was talk about them using Unity in some kind of video game. I think it was Assassin's Creed or something. Yeah, where they were. I don't think that actually happened. They used other technology and stuff, but just for our listeners to give context of like what you guys are in the business of doing is like recreating buildings using software that you see on these on these video games where they're first person
and it's grown to Unreal Engine is made its way into the the video production side of things too, so it's almost a weird mix of video production and video games. It's almost like we're creating a video game of the building, but then we have to put on our photography cap and okay, this angle looks good, and then we actually use a real camera in the software. So, if you want a 15 millimeter focal length or a 25, like you really can. It's strange because you have to know a little bit of photography. You have to know the 3D program. You have to
understand marketing, and construction, and real estate as well. So you're kind of tangent on a lot of different
it's a lot of things that are kind of tied in. But it's super fun to work with. Like Unreal Engine is just to be able to work with it is unbelievable. We can I'll pull up the kind of walkthrough. So Blender, the one that we showed before, if I want to render a clip, it'll take a while because it has to render each light pass. It kind of goes through passes, so it takes a bit longer. Unreal Engine is completely real time, so it does take a little bit longer to set up. But when it is set up, you can walk around.
Is there AI involved in like the behavior of the lighting that you're creating for?
It's weird. So most things are ray traced. So what ray tracing actually is a computer will shoot rays of light and they'll like bounce around in a scene. So it's almost like, have you ever seen like wind studies where they simulate wind and they have a building of a big building and they do the wind study where they kind of have like wind going through. So it's essentially that, but with light. So, we have to...
that is so cool.
It's the real-time stuff is unbelievable. You can just pop right in, and if you want to change the marble on the countertop...
It's just crazy that you created this from nothing. Like, it looks like you're actually walking through a building that exists.
Yeah, so there's a lot of reference photos, but we wanted to create this almost like European-style loft that was maybe 2 or 3 stories up. We wanted to throw some trees in the middle for shadows, just... kind of cinematic looking.
So this is obviously like, again, for context, and I think it's good because I have no idea of this stuff. So for any listeners who don't, but like compare this to SketchUp. Is it the same at all, or is this like just way more advanced for aesthetics?
So there are advantages and disadvantages to SketchUp. So originally we were actually using SketchUp and Lumion, and just to quickly touch on those because it is sort of important to understand. So SketchUp is sort of it's close. It's not AutoCAD, but I think that it at least tried to fill a niche similar to AutoCAD in the sense that it's very like the measurements are all very precise, and you can do like the floor plans and everything. And while you can do that in Blender is not as...
It doesn't cost $3,000 a year either.
Well, no, it's free, but it's also like if I guess if you kind of describe SketchUp as using pencil and paper and a ruler to measure all that, Blender is probably closer to using clay. So it's like we can get exactly what we need and we can make everything be very exact, but it does function a little bit differently because SketchUp is meant to be more about information and not so much visuals. Like it's very interesting when you have the building and you can sort of see how it looks, but it's never going to look photorealistic unless you actually have a render engine inside of SketchUp.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where Lumion comes in. So Lumion and SketchUp are very common among architects, landscape designers, because Lumion is kind of made for people that are not professional 3D artists, but they need to get renders quickly. So if you have to use SketchUp to create a draft of a building, then it's very easy to just plug that into Lumion.
Right, but those aren't going to look like your 3D renderings that you guys
No,
create. Like you said from the beginning, it was...
No. Yeah, basically, like, even if you were really, really good at Lumion, like, you can get some pretty decent renders, but it does take long. Like, it's almost not worth it at a certain point. Like, Lumion is almost best when you're not doing really nice renders. It's just like throw it in, put some sunlight, grass, bang, there you go. If you're spending a lot of time like we are on it, like, even if you're just okay at Blender, you're almost always going to blow Lumion out of the water.
Yeah, so talk about that. Like when you guys did the still rendering for the Canard or some of the other buildings here in the city, and you have to recreate the landscape, like whether it's the water and the streets off to the side, and like there's so much that that goes into that, right? It's not just as simple as what you do on SketchUp, obviously.
No, and well, it's usually the building itself will come with some kind of Revit model. If it's a large building, there's either an AutoCAD or a Revit model, which is the 3D model of the building. So that's essentially like, think of it as a cup, but with no material on it. Like it's just a white basic building. And so we can use that a lot of the time to bring it in, but to create the surrounding areas is kind of what gives it the feel and the atmosphere. So we try to use, we can use drone shots as well if you wanted to go that route. But we actually, for the Canard building, we actually recreated the whole waterfront in 3D. So that gave us the...
So how long does that take for you to recreate the whole Halifax waterfront?
Well, that was...
we actually... That one was a little bit fortunate in the sense that we had actually modeled that parking lot for a different job that we did. So exactly where the Canard was going.
Yeah.
We had actually done some work just in front of the bicycle thief, or to the, I guess, the back side of the bicycle
Bishop's
thief,
Landing somewhere?
Yeah, so just sort of like the end of Bishop's Landing, the closest part to the Canard. So when we ended up talking about that job, we're like, okay, well, we actually have a really good starting point. And then we combine that with the Revit model. There is still quite a bit of work sort of to be done with that. And it's, like Lumion it's pretty cool, like I was saying, but at the same time, since it's made for people that aren't 3D artists, there's a lot of features that are simplified or just outright removed. So it's great. Like I said, if you're not sure about what you're doing, but you just need to get a picture of a building. But whereas we actually have the time and we use things like Blender and Unreal Engine, we expect a lot of these tools to kind of be in there. So then not having them, like, it's kind of like if you need to, if you're building a shed and you just have, just hammer and nails, fine. But then if you're doing a 6-story building and all you have is hammer and nails, you're kind of like, it's like, you could theoretically do it, but it's much more difficult.
Yeah. And the same kind of analogy might be like, every engineer knows how to use CAD, but they're not sitting there drawing all day. So a lot of times they're outsourcing.
No. Yeah. And that's the thing.
Work.
That's the thing too, is a lot of the time this was outsourced to either Russia or China because they were the only ones that really dealt with the render engines. So you can have a 3D model, but to bring it in, texture it, put the light in and everything else, it was kind of a strange process for the longest time. And a lot of the times it was just easiest to go overseas. But then you run into the communication barrier, the time difference is, there's
language barrier.
Yeah, language barrier, which is a huge one actually. So that kind of proved to be an obstacle in itself. So to get, the higher quality renders, people aren't really used to that around here, I don't think, because it's, you're used to just getting an architectural render from an architect, and not to bash on architects, that they're not it's not their main focus.
Do you guys have any clients that are architects? Like, wouldn't architects want to use your...
Yeah, we've worked with architects in the past. So if they have something that's in a development stage and they want to get funding, or if they want a project that they really enjoy that they want to see, we've worked with architects
and home builders as well for residential home rendering and things like that.
Yeah, the home builders and developers are probably the ones that have ended up being our biggest clients. We actually originally thought that it would probably be architects, but we just didn't really realize how much of an appetite the developers would have for these full virtual tours, because from a marketing perspective for them it's great. And so originally we were just sort of, I guess our game plan was just to help architects sort of upgrade what they're presenting to the client, but we just, I guess, found out that it's a much deeper pool than we originally thought.
Yeah, I think I was talking to somebody from, I won't mention the gentleman's name or the company, but it mentioned to me that it might be like part of legislation in the future, either soon or sometime.
We've heard about that.
Yeah, where it's
Yeah.
like, it's part of, you have to get your building permit, you have to get your architectural drawings and specs approved and all that stuff as a developer before you proceed with construction. I think I think you need to have some kind of a rendering, a real time rendering, not just a SketchUp photo, but I guess that would be positive for your business if there's some truth to that. Or not.
Yeah, it'd be kind of interesting because it's, a lot of times I didn't realize how upset people seem to get when new buildings are going up. Like, it seems like whenever there's talk of anything being built, people are not happy about something. So I think that having, high quality renders of that building to kind of show how people will be interacting with the space and how it's going to fit into the city can really help that. Because I guess, I never realized that people had such, strong opinions about that.
Mm-hmm. But
I think that's one of the biggest problems for developers. And I think if you can not only help them sell the space by providing an actual 3D animated virtual tour in real time of all the specific materials and even the furniture layout and everything in real time, but you can also have something, a couple of years before they break ground that'll show the city, how the people in the community can interact with the space. Because essentially, like at this level with Unreal Engine 5 and these, excessive softwares that you're using, like you're creating stuff that's almost taking like emotion and those kind of things in perspective with these amazing renderings.
And it's pretty incredible just how fast all of this moves. Like, so just as a little, a background, the main company that makes graphics cards is NVIDIA. And every 2 years, they come out with a new graphics card, more or less. And that one is typically always twice as good as the one that came out 2 years before it. So it goes up exponentially. And every single time that happens, the amount that we can do with this software basically just skyrockets. So it's pretty crazy how fast it moves. And even in 5 years, like, we may not be doing the virtual tours. Like, we might just have a completely Unreal Engine tours because maybe it's just faster to do it then. So it's pretty crazy just to see how everything, moves like that, because it seems like it's moving faster than just even the world around it.
Well, up until about 5 years ago, if you wanted to render a still image, depending on your machine, that could take you 10 hours, 15 hours, up to 20 hours on a average machine. Now the average machine, the graphics cards have doubled in performance and they've halved in price. So it was a big problem when they first came out because a lot of the people buying them were using them for Bitcoin mining and stuff like that. So I guess they've made it so you can't mine off them anymore, but they're still really hard to get a hold of. But it just goes to show, like, what took you, 15 hours to render a still now takes us about 10 minutes. So that's just in the last 2 years alone. That jump has grown exponentially. So it's kind of a cool space to be in, just to see, where it's going with the hardware.
Sounds hard to keep up with.
Yeah, well, it's just even we've actually talked to some people before too, and they said that, like, for one of those 360 photos that we were talking about, it was taking them 12 hours, and right now, depending on what we're working on, it's either between 10 to 25
minutes.
Minutes, sorry. So like it kind of it just shows like how, like, because then ultimately instead of rendering one photo overnight, now we're doing multiple units. So
wow. So what about, talk about some of the work that goes into a rendering? If there's, if it was I don't know, for an example, it's somewhere like downtown, well, here in Halifax or like downtown Toronto, where there's all kinds of structures and stuff, maybe water in the background, just all kinds of different things that you have to recreate. Like, how long does that process take?
It kind of depends, actually, because what you can do, so we didn't do this on Canard. What you can do is take a photo, like a professional photo, and match the building in. So essentially you take a photo of the empty development site, just photo match the building in, and that kind of, with Photoshop and stuff like that, we're able to overlay it on the actual photograph. Yeah. But then it comes back to, you have to have good composition, you have to have a good camera to take a picture. But with Canard, we went a different route just because we had the whole waterfront area built in 3D. So that gave us the opportunity to say, okay, well, it's all build. It's not a photograph, right? We can, if we want to do a video pan of the waterfront with the boardwalk, then we can do that. Or if, so that, I guess there's two routes to kind of go.
When you have there's a video we could bring up of, I think it's like, is it on the side of Queen's Mark, or it's Murphy's on the
right.
Cable
it's
Wharf.
the,
what is it called?
It
So
was
that? Did you create that whole?
Yeah, so that was all
That's
done
not
in 3D.
there's no photography involved there. That's all 3D.
That was all 3D.
Yeah.
So that was
Wow.
yeah. It's a lot of reference photos. You know, we knew the area pretty well, so we were able to get down there and actually check things out. But
so when you say reference photos, like you actually go down to that location,
Yeah.
street level, and sort of take photos and stuff, and then use those as like a starting point.
kind of like a starting point to get the atmosphere, the mood of the
But you're
space
recreating everything.
and then we
You're using
recreate
those
everything.
photos,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and just to, so what we can typically do is, like, if we had that location, let's say we had sort of just like a top-down CAD drawing. It's going to say, like, the entrance is 300 meters away from, like, I don't know, like this area in the city, or it's like 30 from the road, whatever it is. Then if we have that top down and then just sort of a reference photo, then we can sort of start to build off the two angles. So once we sort of set up one location where it's like maybe there's like a block in the middle, then we can sort of start to fill in the gaps. And what we normally would have with one of those exterior shots is like we kind of have like everything where it's just blocks, or we might just have like kind of like placeholder assets to make sure that we have everything in the right spot. Then maybe we'll put some people around, put some grass, and then we'll start changing out the building. There's a lot of different ways that we can kind of do that, because that's sort of how we do the interior units as well, is that we will take an actual snap from the architectural plans. So we actually don't use the CAD files for that. We just use a picture of the floor plan, sort of like your standard, like this is just the layout. And then it'll normally just have like two lines somewhere that says like, this is 6 feet. So then we drop a block that's 6 feet, scale up the photo, and then we have a perfect footprint of the building, I guess. And so that's how we sort of block out both of them. And I guess to tie back into what you were talking about with how we block out the area in the back, it really just is how we think it's what's going to look better. So if it's got an extremely complex background, like the Halifax Harbor is a good example, then most of the time we would actually use a photo. But since for Kennard, we had actually built up some of that area anyways, then we were able to just put a bit more work into it so that we have that full background, because the background, while it is sometimes an afterthought, it will make the photo. Like if we took the Kennard and just slapped it down in the middle of a bunch of like trees where there's no harbor in the background, It wouldn't make any sense. The whole shape of the building wouldn't make any sense. So like the context is important, even though it's not necessarily the main focus in that photo.
Mm-hmm. But it's just the little details like that, I guess, that we kind of go over where, traditional render companies might not even be from here, have no idea where the development is. And a lot of the times you won't even get those details in there. So we try to position ourselves, I guess, more as marketing content material. We take that extra bit of detail and that extra bit of time to make it that much better. So when it does come down to either a virtual tour or stills or whatever, you can, if you get like a good example of that little apartment that I showed, once that's built, we traditionally don't really charge for still renders. So once the whole apartment is built, you can go in there, and if you want, 10 stills, we'll just go in and take the photographs. So
what we typically, so if you pay for a virtual tour of the unit, you're sort of paying for the 360 images, but then we include the still images because everything is built. So in reality, even if someone wanted us to go around the apartment and take 15 different shots of something, everything is built because we have to do the entire thing down to like the pot lights, the molding, everything. And we also include the floor plan. So we actually remove the roof, put a camera up there. And so then you're getting a rendered floor plan that will look exactly like the virtual tour when you're down inside of it. And then we normally offer the drone panoramas. Sometimes there's an extra charge for that one, just because just drone work in general is sort of broad. Like maybe we have to fly over certain areas. Depending on where the building is, it's more difficult to get the drone, but we do try to include that because as we've sort of mentioned, it's beneficial for not only us, but the client if we have those drone photos. So most of the time that's kind of all within one package. And then the animation that Nick showed you earlier, like with everything kind of moving through the apartment, that's kind of like you get to see sort of the detail that we have to put into everything to get it to work with the 360 tours.
How compatible is like Lumion and Unreal Engine 5 with things like BIM, CAD, and Revit and stuff? Like if an architect reached out to you and wanted a professional rendering done above and beyond what they would usually do with your services, would you get a Revit file from them and be able to create from that, or do you just start from scratch?
Yeah. So Lumion actually has a live link for Revit, so you can you hit the live link and then it transfers everything into SketchUp or into Lumion. Unreal Engine's kind of going the same way. We've seen a lot of like digital twins of buildings being made now, and some of them in the States, I've actually seen one that had the HVAC system built into it as well, so they could kind of pre-route everything before they put the walls up. So most of the software that we use is extremely compatible with Revit files and stuff like that. Yeah.
Something that is what we typically like having the Revit model for is, so if you're doing the exterior of a building, that's typically a high enough quality, like that's good to go. But for the interiors, we still like to sometimes see the Revit model because the dimensions are exact. So we can look at something and go, oh, okay, actually, it looks like in the floor plan, maybe there's a closet here, but then in the Revit model, we notice that it's like 2 separate doors, things like that, because the Revit model will just give us more information. But we typically put a shell over the walls in the interior, just because for things like Blender and Unreal, it does have to be set up in a particular way. So you could bring it straight into Unreal, but to get that extremely high quality that we were looking for, we do have to sort of do some conversion in our workflow, because the other thing too is that Revit has to, like, if you pull up a Revit model, you're looking at the entire building. So there's chairs, there's ovens, things like that. So they can only use, like, you normally get this kind of blocky oven because they might only use, I don't know, let's say 300 basically faces to make this object. Whereas it's very easy for us to have a million and a half.
Yeah, it's just little geometry that comes with the Revit models. But the Revit models are extremely detailed. Like, it can down to the screw tell you what's going in the building. So it is a very good reference point. And it gives us actually we'll probably show it as an example now. I don't think we have anything here, but we'll send it in afterwards. But the canard units, or the canard building, is almost shaped like an L. So if you were, on the far side of the building, or even above one of the pools, you would be, you would see the other half of the building, or you would look out your balcony and see that there's a pool deck or a patio. Yeah. So we're able to actually bring the Revit model in.
You could be out on that pool deck.
Yeah, and be in combination, so you can look out your deck and say, oh, okay, well, the drone photo would be there as the background, but then there's also the 3D model of the building in there. So it's...
You send that to me later so I can dream about being on the pool deck at the Canard Center when it's minus 20 next week.
And that actually touches a bit too on what we were saying about, not only do you have the background for context, but if you have a certain terrace or a pool, but the building isn't in there, that's not going to make any sense. Like the building in relation to that pool is a huge part of it. I know that, so I believe it's the George. We didn't do those renders, but that's just a great example for the people that have seen those, where you're on their terrace, but then you actually look up and you can see the rest of the building. If that wasn't there, then you would just assume that you're at the very top of the building, whereas it kind of shows that you have sort of like the bigger terrace, and then they have their higher wing, or their higher levels, I suppose. And that extra context is extremely important to sort of show the area.
Yeah, well, it's needed too, because a lot of the time people won't tell that this is virtual, right? So if they see something and they're like, oh, well, that's not what I saw, like you almost have to tell them, like this is unless you're willing to put those details in.
The more you talk about these different scenarios, and it sounds like almost like the interior renderings and those things are like almost a different ball game, might say, than the still shots of architectural.
There's a different approach for sure. It's we kind of it's usually one or the other in terms of what people are looking for. Unless they're looking for a walkthrough that starts inside and goes outside, which the Canard walkthrough does. We'll probably be able to show some footage of that too, which gives a good example. But it's crazy how photorealistic stuff is getting these days. Like it's almost too realistic. So
the main difference. So with an exterior, sunlight is it's fairly predictable in the sense that it's like if you kind of put up like a piece of wood, you have a shadow, that kind of thing. but interiors are a bit of a different ball game because it's hitting countertops. You might have multiple pot lights all over the place. You have things are going through glass and doing all these different things. So, and then there's also the natural light included in that. So there's so many different things that it's bouncing off of that it's very, you have to get it right or people are going to be able to tell right away, like that doesn't look realistic. Like it has to have a lot of bounces and very soft shadows. Whereas most of the time, if you're doing an exterior, the main source is the sun. And, you are going to have sort of what you would expect from a building casting a shadow sort of in the afternoon. So I'd say that they both come with their own challenges. Having the Revit model is huge though. Like there are times where we can actually quote 30 to 40% of what we normally would because we have that Revit model. I'm fully capable of modeling something like the Canard, but that would be a huge undertaking. It would probably take me weeks, if not over a month, just to get every detail because I'd have to put every piece of spandrel, every door, every window like that. So, and I'd have to keep referencing the photo. So while it's possible for us to do it, the architect has already done it in most cases. And so with that level of detail, we're able to just kind of take it and then sort of elevate that beyond just, a standard, like throwing in the sun and grass. We're able to put people in, we're able to put high quality cars in, we're able to change the mood. So maybe you have like a dusk shot or you have something that's kind of in the morning where people are just going to work, things like that.
And especially for the larger complex projects, a lot of these large architecture firms are working on throughout Atlantic Canada or elsewhere. Like you'd think that, that extensive level of rendering you just mentioned would be desirable, especially on these largely funded projects, right?
Yeah, and I think a lot of the time it's people are interested once they kind of see what we can do and the value that we can offer. It's just sort of getting our foot in the door with people, I think, because if people find out that we do renders, I think that people sort of think about, I guess, how renders used to be done in the sense that, maybe it's like one still image. And, if you're just getting...
Or they assume something that someone did on SketchUp for them. Like a year ago.
And that's also... Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it might just be something that is either low quality or maybe they just didn't get that many of them because in reality, if you're only getting one or two images done for the interior of a building, yeah, you could probably just not go with it. But now if you're talking about the service that we can provide where you're getting hundreds of 360 photos and then, maybe 50 or 60 still images, well, that's a very big difference. That's a whole marketing, package basically. And I think that once people realize that they can also use that internally and externally, then people are much more willing to kind of, let us sort of do our thing, and they're much more interested long term.
Comes back to the mistake thing too. Like if you render a room and that's used as a tool for an electrician to go in and see where the plugs go or whatever, like if it prevents one problem that can pay for itself, like in terms of the tour, like the money that you would save in rent and monthly rent income for 1 year, I think the tour would pay for itself. Like you just need to get one person in there that used the tour, then it's paid for itself. So it's I mean, in terms of
you're also saving cost on sellers for those units, people having actual physical tours on site, and
Yeah, the 3D Vista stuff actually comes with a virtual tour agent, so I think you can go in and schedule a time and meet with other people, and it'll actually take you around and show you the. So it's, I mean, where people
have to think that this is something that you're going to see more and more. I mean, you're working on this kind of first big one with the Canard Center. You've done some stuff at Margaretta, but you have to think like I'm a developer and I can get 5 renderings of 5 different types of units in my building that has 100 units.
Yeah.
Why not get those done and have everything rented before?
Every type is already done, right? So in the model suite, you've got one unit type, but you can get a virtual tour of, traditionally there's 10 to 15 to 20 unit types. And, if there's 200 units in your building, it makes sense to just get every unit type. And then if anyone wants to move it at any point, you have that data, that content that you can just pull up and say, here you go, here's your unit.
And they have exactly what they're going to get. The walkthrough is identical. If they don't like some colors a year before, well, you can change the cabinets and put some satin or stainless steel hardware on there. And
and we can even sort of take out so let's just say that we're doing a building and the materials were perfect. So they have all the materials picked out. Like there was no problems there. They wouldn't have like had any extra costs incurred for any mistake with the materials. Once we have gone in and done that, then now you can actually show what it would look in a photorealistic photo to all of the people doing the millwork or the cabinetry, as we mentioned. So if there's a particular, maybe there's something that's a very unique problem, and people are thinking, just looking at these designs, they're saying, okay, so these are the quotes, and they have like a wider spread. I would argue that once we do those renders, it's actually going to give a much more accurate description to the people that are doing the work, and you may actually be able to have a more accurate reflection of those costs, and then it drives value in that way. And that's, like I said, that's not even including the fact that if a large building basically makes one mistake with the materials, whether it's maybe ordering slightly the wrong color or something like that, then that's probably going to cost more than all of the renders that we did for that building.
Okay, well let's say another hypothetical. What if I'm a developer and there's 5 units on the top floor in this brand new building that's going to be finished in a year from now, and they're all suites different than the other units, and I wanted to leave all the materials up to the renters. Well, you could just do a 3D walkthrough of everyone and put like 4 different options of colors and flooring material and all that kind of stuff. And if a client wanted to request a change, well, then you just make the edit and show them what the space looks like with that change, whatever it might be.
So we can take it almost a step further, where if a developer comes to us and they have a unit and then we'll have, say 5 different hardwoods picked out, we can go to those suppliers, get the actual hardwood photos, bring that in with the cost per square foot, and then you have, here's what this option looks like, here's what this option looks like, but here's also what the price is going to cost you. Like it's going to be, X amount of dollars more, but it looks amazing, so let's do it. We found that was pretty valuable. Greg, you had a good analogy, I guess, in the sense that it's almost like when you get these documents beforehand, the interior design and stuff, like you have, I guess, a layout of everything, but you don't know what it's going to look like in the space. So you compared it, I think, to reading a book together as opposed to watching a movie together. So you can all look through the materials and have a different idea of what's going on. But if you all see that together in a room and take the tour,
a good analogy.
It's pretty powerful. Yeah. Like there's any discrepancy that you thought, oh, maybe that would look good, then you're all sitting there looking at it. You can discuss.
You're not leaving anything up.
And that's the exact thing I guess we were even talking about. So like if you're reading a book and someone says there was like a dark castle in the distance, I almost guarantee that every single person that just pictured that in their head has like, if we were able to all compare what we pictured, it's different. Whereas if I showed you the picture of it, then you can start to say like, okay, well, maybe the path going up to the castle is, we need to change this, or like there's that. So it's, you really are all focusing in with the exact same image instead of sort of trying to compare how you're interpreting the area.
Right. So who are you competing with? I mean, you mentioned, companies in China, and a lot of people have been outsourcing that. Like locally, is anyone else doing exactly what you're doing here? There will be.
Yes and no. So renders, like the renders. So something that I think we are different than other rendering companies in the sense that we try and take on bigger jobs. So as I mentioned, there's it's not uncommon for like a sort of a rendering studio to only do like 3 shots of an interior or something. It's kind of an economy of scale in the sense that more renders we're doing, the less we actually have to charge per render in a way. Because if we're doing a full 360 tour, we would probably charge more for 4 stills inside of an apartment than the actual virtual tour. Whereas if you just get the virtual tour, we'll give you 10 if you want, because it's very jarring to do a certain area and then people say, oh, actually, can you shift it so we can see the bathroom? Because now we have to do the kitchen and the bathroom, and it's much more back and forth, and it's kind of jarring in that respect. So not only have we sort of figured out some workflows to do these big jobs, but we do a lot of work sort of behind the scenes. So I've spent hundreds of hours organizing our model library. So we have everything organized with furniture, maybe it's like wall plaster, all the assets that we need, so that when it is actually go time to drop everything in, then we are dropping in sort of our finished asset, and then we can sort of adjust the materials from there. Right. And whereas with other times, what would happen is that a lot of these companies may not even have that bed until you actually go and say, like, we need to get something like this. So then they would have to go set up the materials every single time. They have this brand new bed, and it might take them really realistically, it could take them 5 to 10 times longer to do a single unit. And then that's not even including the fact that we've spent, you know, I think our computers combined are probably close to $15,000. But we're even looking right now at getting basically like a crazy computer that can render even faster than that, because that ultimately means that it's more drafts for the client, which that's a big difference too. We try and give tons of drafts so that the client doesn't just get the final image and they're like, it's wrong. Like you'll be able to walk through the apartment before it's finished, and we're still working through it. So I think that to kind of summarize it, I think that we're much better adapted to doing these huge jobs because we link everything together and we spend lots of time before we actually get the job setting things up so that everything just can roll through quickly.
Mm-hmm. And we are in the process of actually putting all these onto our websites. You know, when we get a development and there's a new apartment unit, a lot of the time there's some back and forth with different styles and what they're going for. This would allow us to put all 5,000 of our assets onto our website. You can go in; they're all labeled as free, so you just check out with whatever you want, and then that's your building style. So that we found that's pretty easy. And you know, we're not pioneers, I think, in the space by any means, but the rate in which it's just come around and progressed is unbelievable in the last 2 or 3 years. Yeah. So I mean, anyone can get into it, and it's you know, with Blender and stuff, it's encouraged because it's free, but it does take some time to learn the software.
You're doing a lot of educational videos online as well, right? I mean, you have a large following on, and you know, you're teaching people how to use some of these softwares too with Lumion and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's
and Unreal Engine 5 too.
Yeah. The YouTube community has been pretty crazy, and it's good to connect. You know, when we put these tutorials out, and you know, a firm down in Mexico or whatever will reach out and say, "Oh, you know, this really helped us. Like, thank you for that." And we just connect with different types of people, and then, you know, find different problems that are kind of universal in the space, and then really. You could watch all our tutorials, I guess, and start a render company and go that route if you wanted to. But it's you know, it's a commitment. There's a lot to learn, and there's no real course you can take that will teach you this stuff.
You can there are courses, but like to really understand, like if you watch a course, you're not just going to be able to do it instantly. Like it's something that it's almost like taking a course on like painting, whereas like you'll be better than when you started the course, but you're not going to be able to just go and paint whatever you want because you took a 15-hour course. Yeah. Like it's a lot of practice and a lot of sort of, I guess, visualizing it.
And I think, you know, you're speaking about some really large projects that you're kind of targeting, and obviously, you know, those types of clients are going to want to see, you know, your portfolio and some past work that you've done and all that kind of stuff too. So it seems like you guys are maybe not pioneers, but maybe front runners for sure, especially locally, for sure.
We'd love to think so, but
well, you know how busy it is right now as well for development and stuff, like not just in, you know, all over the 4 provinces of Atlantic Canada. Like, you'd have to think.
Yeah, we've seen. I mean, we have got a couple clients in New Brunswick. We've got, you know, people reaching out to us in Western Canada as well. So it's, you know, there is a need for stuff like this, and it's amazing because, like, we love doing it. Like, it's super fun to be able to do this stuff, but it's a weird skill set. Like, you can be amazing at rendering, but then if you can't use a camera and you don't know how to position it in the correct, like, you need to almost know architectural photography, you need to know lighting, you need to know, you know, you have to have some kind of interior background or some kind of design background, I guess, is really helpful, but there's a lot of elements to kind of pull from. But it's fun. We love doing it. You know, it's
funny you mentioned that.
Go ahead, Greg. Sorry.
Oh no. So I was just gonna say. So like, it's kind of funny because when you so with 3D artists, like being able to make something that looks photorealistic, people say that's step 1, because that's almost like having a camera and like being a photographer. It's like figuring out where you hit that basically like snapshot button. That's the first step. Then you have to learn the composition of a photo. Like, well, you know, why are you showing this? Like, how is everything positioned? So being able to just use Blender to show something that looks realistic is only the first step to really becoming, like, I guess, a world-class 3D artist. I'm not saying we are, but I'm saying that that first step is actually just being able to control the software well enough to make it look realistic. But then you have many steps after that of just learning like how to make things like just to really convey that just with one image.
And it's a bit of a rabbit hole you find yourself down.
Yeah.
But if you're into that kind of stuff, like movie effects, gaming, and stuff like that's always been, passions of ours and very interesting to us. So to be able to kind of draw from the video game engine and then maybe pull some video effects after that are used in Hollywood, like just to be able to kind of leverage everything I think it's super fun. I think, it's a service
it's crazy.
Yeah, it allows us to kind of, pull some different creative strings and do some cool stuff.
Yeah, it's definitely cool stuff. I mean, it's been great chatting with you guys about all the exciting stuff you're doing, and I'm sure our listeners and viewers that are seeing the videos of your products on the screen here are going to be impressed as we are with how cool it is and the stuff that you guys can create. It's amazing. Any closing comments before we wrap up? I know we probably could have talked about a lot more about technology and software and things like that.
Yeah.
I hope I asked some interesting questions for people who don't know anything about that side of things, like myself. But
it's kind of a delicate balance because, like as Nick said, there's so many rabbit holes with this that it can get pretty crazy. But you also need to, I guess we tried to convey it in a sense that someone who's not too familiar with it would make sense to them. But we probably did some rambling just because there is really so much out there that you wouldn't believe it. So even just trying to condense that down can be impossible sometimes.
And the whole virtual building space, I guess, is kind of blowing up. Like with the metaverse and everything else, that's something, pre-COVID, you wouldn't really think opportunities like that would arrive. But we've had people reach out to us, asking if we do NFTs or if we can build a virtual home for someone's online platform, which is, up until COVID, I would never thought that would kind of be a market, but that seems to be.
Well, I think you're in a really unique space, because I think, I can speak from the world that I come from, the construction world. There's a lot of, maybe there's even developers and more on the real estate end that aren't aware of, how extensive some of the services that you guys can create are, and to the extent that it can go with these 3D animations and virtual tours and things. And then also to understand, after seeing the product, the value on the business side, not just to market it, but to save money and not having units unrented or not purchased because you're able to show the space virtually, and you're saving all kinds of overhead costs and things like that. So I think it's like you're kind of on the verge of two different worlds, but it seems to be something that's
it's almost it's tough to incorporate, I guess, a creative endeavor with a business, but it seems to be more and more, I guess, mainstream now with everything that's going on, and it's just a really cool space to be in.
Yeah, sure.
It's pretty incredible. I just find it funny that, like, if you told me 5 years ago when I was still in school that I'd be a 3D artist, like I would just be like, that's so incredibly impossible. So it's just like just an accountant, life. I guess. Like, no, a very unartistic accountant.
Yeah,
he's a creative. He's a creative accountant. Watch out! You don't want to hire this guy.
It's just, I don't know. It's crazy how that's all developed. But I'm very happy to be living back in Halifax full time, and especially kind of being a part of everything that's been going on, because our lives, Halifax was just sort of just treading water. wasn't going. Nothing really bad or good. It was just sort of it was quiet Halifax, just nice. But now it doesn't feel like that at all. So
yeah, we've been extremely blessed in that sense that it's it was a good time to start the business. Not only was there a need for it, but I guess to get in when we did and to be able to take that full year to learn and stuff like that really helped us out in terms of where everything's going and the boom in Halifax behind it. That's just a cherry on the top kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure. Timing is definitely perfect, and we'll be excited to hear how things are going for you guys in the near future. And this has been great and hopefully informative for our listeners and people in the industry that are going to be interested in this service, whether it be architects or developers or whatnot. So
yeah, and if anyone is interested in just learning more, please reach out to us. My email is g.miles@Luminous Labs, and I believe Nick's is just Nick@Luminous Labs. So if you had any questions or just wanted to talk about it a little bit, we're pretty much always at our computers, so we can give you some more information there.
Awesome, yeah, and they can also we'll post your contact info on our platforms, and if they DM us, we'll forward them along to you. And yeah, best of luck. And this has been it's been great, really interesting, and a great time chatting with you guys. So Nick and Greg from Luminous Labs, thank you.
Great.
Thanks so much.
Awesome. Thanks.
Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, thank you.
Cheers.
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 Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Atlanta Construction Podcast. Be sure to follow us on any podcast platform you use. You can also find us on LinkedIn and Instagram at Atlanta Construction Podcast. Be sure to send us a comment or a review. We'd love to engage with you.